Sweet Baby Inc.'s biggest failure is seemingly its biggest success, and that's what we're seeing with Spider-Man 2 as it makes the rival on PC, where it's supposed to be lauded by critics and where PC players are supposed to come in and play this game at record numbers. But that is just simply not the case with this buggy mess of a game that has come out, and is just showing the cracks that we saw in the initial release of this game, where it's just not a game that is actually striking a chord with game players. Game players are saying they're not going to play the game until they fix some of the bugs and crashes that are happening with the game and property. But even without those technical difficulties, this is a game that is not reaching the record numbers that it was hoping to reach. It barely has over 21,000 people playing this game on Steam, and the game players that are playing it are just simply not enjoying it. Even the ones that don't have the bugs and crashes that are being popularized on social media. This is a game that is kind of frustrating people who expected something similar to the first Spider-Man game and are getting something deeply different and new. And I think that is the thing that is leading to a lot of non-recommendations for this game. It's the thing at the core of Spider-Man 2 that has frustrated game players since its release. It's the political progressive activist ideals that kind of flood the game itself, and I think those ideals hinder and block what people loved about Spider-Man 1. And it goes back to the developers of this game and the consultancy groups that had influence over this production. I'm talking about Sweet Baby Inc. Sweet Baby Inc. is a consultancy firm that's focused on political progressive activism and DEI principles. It wants to include diversity, equity, inclusion at the forefront of the games that they are consulting on. And that's exactly what we saw with the production of Spider-Man 2, where it became a game that was more focused on the diversity of the characters rather than the actual entertainment of the game player. And the story itself was something filled with these ideological principles that pushed away a lot of gamers, where the sales of this game is not even comparable to the first one. I know people are going to say this sold over 2.5 million copies in 24 hours. I say those sales are from the success of the first one, where that game was so good that gamers just put their trust in the developers to make another game similar to that. And that's why this game sold over 11 million units. Those are big time blockbuster successful numbers, but is that really the truth? When you have that comparison to the first initial game that came out, you see those numbers being actually not that impressive, because Spider-Man 1, its predecessor, sold those numbers within the first few months of the release of the game, and it reached record numbers of over 22 million copies sold in its first 3 to 4 years of production, and it went even beyond that to 25 to 26 million copies sold day to day in 2025. This is a game that is selling record numbers, and this includes over 6 to 7 million sold with the PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4 bundle itself, which people will use that as a discount of the numbers of this game. But you can apply that same discount of numbers to Spider-Man 2, where a lot of the 11 million units came from bundles with the PS5, and that is taking away 4 to 5 million copies sold. So the real amount of copies sold for Spider-Man 2 is hovering around 6 to 5 million. That is just based on the strength of its predecessor, Spider-Man 1. And this is showing that games being developed by these consultancy firms, by these political activist organizations, are showing poor results. They're selling less than half of what the original predecessor game actually sold, because if you remove the PS5, PS4 bundles for Spider-Man 1, it still sold like 19 million units. And you remove those bundles for Spider-Man 2, you're looking at 5 to 6 million units sold. That is less than 1/4 of the units sold for Spider-Man 1. And I think that is just a glaring fault with this game, where it's just a game that hasn't brought in the same game players that it brought in with the first one. And this is a reflection on Sony itself, has done this consistently with a lot of titles that have been focused on these political activist messaging and DEI elements. We saw the same thing happen with Horizon Forbidden West, based on the predecessor Horizon Zero Dawn, who already had a lot of these values, but gamers liked the concept of Horizon Zero Dawn. And that game sold over 20 million copies, but Forbidden West barely is breaking 7 million copies. It's just showing that gamers don't trust these games anymore and these developers and what they do with these products, and they're not transferring over to the PC. And the PC release is becoming a disastrous release because of the bugs associated with the game, where people can't even move with the character properly because it's all choppy and buggy. And I think that is the thing that we're seeing in the gaming industry today, where the games coming out are being developed by people that just don't have the skills to produce these games anymore. And I think we see this consistently with a lot of titles that are coming from Sony right now, where we have developers that just don't know how to port games anymore, and where they crash instantly when you try to do anything within the game. This is the sign of the failures that we're seeing in the gaming industry and the rot that has developed with even the developers themselves when they're making and even producing content for these platforms. And I think Spider-Man 2, which is supposed to be reflective of the greatest successes of Sweet Baby Inc., is showing that it is the biggest failure because it hasn't been able to reach those tall numbers of its predecessors, and more than anything, it devalued the quality of the entire series itself, where people are not even looking forward to new Insomniac games, specifically a game titled after one of the best X-Men in history, Wolverine. And after we saw some screenshots of Jean Grey and other characters in this game, people realized, oh, this is another Sweet Baby Inc. game. It's a game that is going to be focused on DEI elements. It's going to be focused on political activism, and we're going to get something that is not even interested in making content that is actually entertaining and valuable to the game player base. And you saw this with Spider-Man 2, the changes they made from the first one to the second one, where Mary Jane became an entirely different person that was shaped after someone else within the gaming company itself, where they simply took out a staff writer and mirrored image her into the game that was released. I think that is the annoying thing gamers are seeing, where they're doing things to placate themselves, to appease their self-image, and it has nothing to do with the quality of the game or the product that they're putting out. And I think that is a failure that we're seeing within the gaming industry, where these DEI elements that have to have body positivity, that have to have de-beautifying elements and defeminizing elements of the characters be at the forefront, because they feel like that is offensive to have someone feminine, because there's people out there that don't have the ability to become feminine, because that is a trans minority issue that they have to focus on. And it's just these small elements that just don't make sense for the gamer and inhibit the growth and actual creativity of the developers themselves. And I think that's the thing that people hate about Sweet Baby Inc. and the symbols that they put in the game, because it's a marker of the low quality that we're about to get in the game. If they actually put out quality products that had an impact in the industry that was in a positive way, gamers would see these markers as something, as a sign of positivity. But that is just not the case. These markers that we see in the game, these elements that are focused on racial, gender issues, are a marker of a bad game instantly, because bad games are associated with them. And I think that is the thing that we're seeing with Spider-Man 2. It's associated with being a bad game, and most gamers have that in mind when we see another product coming out from Insomniac and Naughty Dog. We instantly think, oh, this is another bad game. Same thing happened with Intergalactic. Once we knew, but we kind of already knew that game was Naughty Dog, but just based on the looks. It had all the hallmarkers, and once we know it was Naughty Dog, we knew it was going to be a terrible game, because they are inundated with this philosophy that wants to impose itself onto the gamer, and gamers don't want to be imposed on. We just want to play games and have fun. And I think the PC release of Spider-Man 2 is showing that gamers are rejecting this philosophy now. They're not going to put up with it. They're just going to leave it to the wayside. This game is doing okay numbers, but mostly bad numbers if you compare it to the release of Spider-Man 1 onto the PC platform, where it skyrocketed and got 66,000 concurrent players and over 40,000 players playing it consistently for about a year before it dropped down to around 10,000 players. And I think that is the situation for highly successful games. They reach these pinnacle marks, and this is after selling over 22 million copies. Players still wanted to play this game, and I think it reflects itself, and that's just not the case with Spider-Man 2. No one really cares about this game, no one wants to play it, and no one's really talking about it. And it's reflecting itself back in the numbers, back in the content that we're seeing coming out about this game, and it's showing itself in the complaints that gamers are having with this property. And I think more than anything, seeing these Mary Jane scenes come back is just so annoying to watch, because it's just the quintessential issue with the game itself. It was trying to be a girl boss fantasy in a Spider-Man universe, and it was trying to impose these different characters on the gamers, when gamers just want to be Peter Parker at the end of the day. I know people like Miles Morales. I never cared about him. I don't care about the Spider-Verse movies at all. I know people enjoy them as well. I just want to see Peter Parker, and it's just, that's not what we got with this game, and that's why it failed. But that's just my thoughts on the situation. You tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.